A room full of the smartest advisors in the United States approved one of the worst military decisions in American history. Almost nobody in that room said, "Stop." In 1961, President John F. Pound Kennedy sat down with his top military and intelligence advisors to decide whether to green-light an invasion of Cuba. The plan became known as the Bay of Pigs. These were not careless people. They were some of the most credentialed minds in government, hand-picked, briefed, experienced. And they approved a plan that fell apart almost as soon as it began. Not because they lacked information, not because nobody in the room had doubts, because of something far more uncomfortable. The room itself made doubt feel dangerous to say out loud. Think about how strange that actually is for a second. This wasn't a case of one overconfident executive steamrolling a room of nervous juniors. This was a table of peers, people used to arguing with each other over policy for a living. The argument simply didn't happen when it mattered most. That's the detail that should make you uneasy. It means the failure wasn't a personnel problem. It was a room problem. And rooms like that exist in every organization, including yours, including mine, right now, today. Afterward, a psychologist named Irving Janis went looking for an explanation. He didn't find incompetence, he found something stranger, something that should worry you more, honestly. It means the failure wasn't really about who was in the room. It was about how the room behaved. He found a group of intelligent people who talked themselves into a bad plan together, in real time. They sincerely believed the whole time that they were being careful and rigorous. Janis gave this pattern a name, Groupthink. And once you understand how it actually works, mechanically, step by step, you start seeing it everywhere. Not just in a presidential situation room deciding matters of war, in ordinary Tuesday morning meetings, in product launches, in budget approvals, in any room where a group has to land on one answer together. Here's the mechanism, stripped down to its simplest form. Groupthink happens when a group starts valuing agreement more than accuracy. That sounds abstract, so picture it directly, at ground level, the way it actually plays out. A team sits down to make a call on something that matters. Somewhere in that room, someone has a doubt. Maybe the timeline looks unrealistic. Maybe the underlying assumptions feel shaky. Maybe the plan depends on something nobody has actually verified. But raising that doubt costs something socially, immediately, in front of everyone. It slows the meeting down. It makes the person raising it look difficult, or negative, or like they're not really a team player. So the doubt stays exactly where it started, inside the person's head, instead of coming out of their mouth. Multiply that by everyone else in the room, independently running the exact same calculation. You get a meeting that looks completely unanimous, when really it's just quiet. Nobody agreed. Everybody just declined to be the one who spoke first. Janis studied this pattern closely enough to break it down into distinct warning signs. They're worth learning by name. Once you can name a pattern while it's happening, you can actually catch it in your own meetings, this week, instead of only recognizing it in hindsight, months later, once the decision has already failed. The first warning sign is an illusion of unanimity. This is the big one, the one that does the most damage precisely because it's invisible from inside the room. When nobody objects out loud, the room reads that silence as agreement. But silence is not agreement. Silence is just silence. It can mean everyone genuinely agrees, sure. It can also mean 5 different people privately have doubts. Each one assumes they're the only one holding a concern. Nobody wants to be the lone hand going up and breaking what looks like a peaceful consensus. From the outside, and often from the inside too, those two situations look identical. A quiet room and an agreeing room wear the exact same face. The second warning sign is self-censorship. This one happens privately, inside a single person's head. Nobody else can even see it occurring. They have an objection forming. They run a quick mental cost-benefit calculation. They decide it's not worth the friction it would cause. So they bury it rather than raise it. This particular sign is sneaky. From the inside, it doesn't feel like caving to pressure at all. It feels responsible. It feels like picking your battles wisely, like reading the room, like not wanting to be the person who derails a meeting over a hunch. but multiplies self-censorship across an entire team of otherwise sharp, capable people. You've built a system where the single most useful information in the building never actually gets said out loud by anyone, ever. The third warning sign is pressure on doubters to fall in line quickly. If someone does manage to speak up despite all of that, watch closely what happens next, because it's rarely dramatic. The group usually doesn't attack the objection head-on. That would be too obvious, too confrontational. More often it just moves past the objection fast, treats it like a minor speed bump instead of a real fork in the road. It keeps rolling toward the decision everyone already seemed to want before the meeting even started. The doubter gets the message, without anyone ever saying it out loud. We heard you, we're moving on anyway, don't make this weird. The fourth warning sign is a dominant leader who never gets challenged. When the person running the meeting signals a preference early, even subtly, even unintentionally, through tone or body language, or just which option they describe first, the rest of the group tends to orient around that signal, whether they consciously mean to or not. Nobody wants to be the one publicly contradicting the boss in front of colleagues. So the real debate that should happen never actually starts. It just performs the motions of happening. Options get listed, questions get asked, and everyone still walks out of the room thinking a careful decision got made, when really the outcome was decided the moment the leader tipped their hand. There's a useful analogy here, and it has nothing to do with government or war rooms. Think about how a group of friends decides where to eat dinner. Someone suggests a restaurant. Nobody loves the idea. Nobody hates it enough to be the one who kills the plan either. Everyone shrugs and says, "Sure, works for me." The group ends up somewhere nobody actually wanted to go. Afterward, in the car, 2 or 3 people quietly admit they weren't that into it. Multiply the stakes of that exact same social dynamic by 1,000, put it in a boardroom instead of a parking lot, and you have groupthink. The mechanism is not exotic. It's the same shrug, just wearing a suit. Managers see a version of this constantly. It usually looks completely harmless from the inside while it's happening. A team agrees fast in a meeting. The room nods along. The decision gets made in 10 minutes flat. Everyone walks out feeling efficient, maybe even a little proud of how smoothly it went. Then, a day later, someone quietly pulls the manager aside and admits they actually had real concerns the entire time. They just didn't say anything in the room. That meeting felt smooth because it was fake smooth. The real debate got skipped in favor of comfort. Nobody even noticed the debate was missing until the decision itself started to wobble weeks later. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you if you run any kind of team, large or small. Fast, easy agreement is not evidence that a decision is good. It's just evidence that nobody in the room wanted to be the friction that day. Those are two entirely different things. Groupthink works precisely because they feel identical from inside the meeting while it's unfolding. You cannot tell the difference by watching how confidently everyone nods. So what actually breaks the pattern? This is the part that surprises most people. The natural instinct is to add more process on top of the problem. More meetings, more sign-offs, more stakeholders in the room to theoretically catch the mistake before it ships. That instinct is wrong, and it's wrong in a specific, predictable way. More people in a room under the exact same social pressure just produces more silence, not more scrutiny. A bigger crowd of quiet people is still, at the end of the day, a crowd of quiet people. The real fix is structural, not procedural, and it's deceptively small. Assign one specific person to actively argue against the plan every single time, regardless of what they personally believe about it deep down. Some organizations formalize this exact role as a designated devil's advocate. Their entire job in that meeting, their assignment, is to poke holes and stress test assumptions. Their job is to voice the objection that everyone else in the room is quietly sitting on but too uncomfortable to raise themselves. Because the objection now comes attached to an assigned role instead of a personal risk, it can get said out loud without costing the person who says it any social capital whatsoever. Nobody thinks less of them for doing their job. It's not their opinion anymore, it's their assignment. That distinction changes everything about how the room receives it. Other organizations rotate that role deliberately. This way, no single teammate becomes permanently known as the critic. That label would eventually make them easy to dismiss as predictable. It would quietly load the entire social cost of dissent onto one exhausted person meeting after meeting. Rotating it also does something subtler and arguably more important. It teaches every person on the team what disagreement feels like to voice out loud in a low-stakes, sanctioned way. So when a genuine, unassigned objection comes up later, speaking, it doesn't feel foreign or terrifying anymore. The muscle has already been used before, on purpose, in practice rounds. And here's a detail from the story itself that a lot of people skip past, even though it's arguably the most useful part of the whole account. Kennedy didn't just absorb the Bay of Pigs failure as a one-time embarrassment and move forward with the same broken process still intact. He actually changed how his own team operated afterward. When the Cuban Missile Crisis arrived, a confrontation with the Soviet Union that carried far higher stakes than Cuba alone ever did, Kennedy deliberately restructured how his advisors were allowed to debate the options in front of him. And by most accounts of that later episode, the room behaved differently the second time around. It didn't just perform agreement for the sake of moving quickly, it actually argued, out loud, on the record. That detail matters more than it first appears. It tells you groupthink isn't a fixed, permanent trait belonging to a particular leader or a particular team, something you either have baked in or you don't. It's a property of a process, and processes can be redesigned. You can take a team that failed this exact way once, under enormous pressure. You can deliberately re-engineer how it deliberates afterward. You get a genuinely different outcome the next time the stakes are just as high or higher. It's worth sitting with the contrast for a moment. It's rare to get a real before and after test of the same leader, the same broad circle of advisors, facing two separate high-pressure decisions years apart. Most of the time, a bad decision just gets studied once and everyone moves on, hoping the lesson sticks somewhere abstract. Here, the same person got a second live test, under arguably worse stakes. That test changed the input variable that actually mattered. Not who was in the room, how the room was allowed to talk to each other. That's the part worth remembering longer than the failure itself. The failure is the famous part of the story. The fix is the useful part. And notice what the fix was not. It wasn't firing anyone. It wasn't replacing the advisors with smarter or more experienced people. The people were largely the same. What changed was the permission structure around dissent, the rules for how disagreement was allowed to enter the conversation. That's an encouraging detail for any manager listening to this. It means you don't need to rebuild your team to fix this problem. You need to rebuild the meeting. Here's my own take on why this trap catches smart people specifically. Not just careless or lazy ones. I think this is the part that actually explains why it keeps recurring at the highest levels of competent organizations. Intelligence doesn't protect anyone from groupthink. If anything, it makes the fake smooth agreement feel more convincing while it's happening. Everyone in the room is skilled enough to sound rigorous and articulate even when they're actually just being quiet and compliant underneath the polish. A room of confident experts nodding looks exactly, indistinguishably, like a room of experts who've genuinely done the analysis. From the outside, and frankly often from the inside too, you cannot tell real consensus apart from comfortable silence just by watching how sure everyone sounds while they agree. So here's the actual test worth running on your own team, starting with your very next real decision, not some hypothetical future one. Don't ask whether everyone agreed. Ask how fast they agreed. Ask whether a single person in that room was formally, explicitly responsible for disagreeing. If the honest answer to that second question is nobody, you don't actually know whether you have a good plan. You just know you have a quiet room that's been mistaken for one. Build the dissent into the process on purpose, deliberately, before the decision ships, not after it's already failed and someone quietly admits, for the second time in your career, they had concerns the whole time and just never said so. Run that test on the decisions you've already made this month, honestly, without flattering yourself. Think back to the last time a plan sailed through a meeting without a single hard question. Was that speed a sign the plan was obviously right? Or was it just a sign that nobody in the room felt safe enough to slow it down? If you can't answer that with confidence, that uncertainty is itself the data point. It means you are flying on an illusion of unanimity without knowing it, The same illusion that sat quietly in the room in 1961, while a plan nobody had truly stress-tested, got waved through by people who genuinely believed they had done their diligence. Because that's the real lesson sitting underneath the Bay of Pigs story, underneath all the history and all the analysis. It was never simply a room full of unqualified people making an obviously bad call. It was a room full of genuinely qualified people who let agreement quietly replace accuracy, one small, unspoken objection at a time, until the plan that finally got approved was the plan nobody in the building had actually stress-tested out loud. That's the part smart teams keep getting wrong, in government rooms and in ordinary offices alike. It's the part that one single assigned skeptic, given real permission to push back, can actually fix. If a breakdown like this changes how you sit through your next meeting, hit subscribe. A new one like it lands every week.